And there is Socrates generally tends to focus on unitary definitions. Um, and it's good, but like we were talking about with games earlier, Wittgenstein says that there are certain definitions where there is no unitary definition that covers all those things. So think of a game. A video game and Scrabble are both games, and football is a game, but they don't all have a unitary definition. They have what Wittgenstein calls familial relationships, where there's a whole bunch of things that describes games, and certain games have only some of those resemblances, but we still call them games.
Yeah, and that would be sort of your big ticket thing, wouldn't it? And then you'd break it down into a board game, a computer game. And all computer games have a similarity in the sense that they're things that are played on a computer. But even then, you could get a board game inside of a computer game that you're not playing on a real board, you're playing on a computer.
Exactly. So it's more sort of how we've come to describe certain things. So when Socrates says you've given me a swarm of definitions, well, that might actually be the case in some cases, where we describe things not based on a singular definition, but based on properties or based on groups. So it's always worth remembering that while we might be able to give a unitary definition, it's not always the case. So bringing it back to something like atheism, we have two different definitions. Both are atheism. Both might have a common property in that both groups lack a belief in the existence of gods, but they're defined slightly differently. And they're both self-confessed definitions to some extent. I mean, the belief God does not exist comes from philosophy, and it comes from taking a particular stance towards the proposition. But it would still be people applying that label to themselves, so to speak.
Yeah. Sorry, what you've just said as well, whilst you find your next piece, it reminded me of a conversation that I had in our debate group recently, where I was talking about someone asked a question, that Pratik, I think is his name, and he was talking about, if you give up on God and religion, do you become a nihilist or a humanist? He basically gave a bit of a false dichotomy. And I went on to describe, assuming you mean leaving religion never to come back, and you mean giving up on God, at the very least you become a non-theist. Everything from there is up for grabs. You're not necessarily going to be a nihilist. You're not necessarily going to be a humanist. You could have a bit of overlap between the two, unless you become an incredibly, strict in one of those senses of the words. And obviously we had someone jump in, and standard rhetoric of, atheism is only a lack of belief. Atheism literally means not a theist, and all of that sort of stuff. And the conversation went on, and I was explaining a couple of different bits, and there was a lot of resistance. And then he basically did if you've got something new, prove your God exists. I was like, I'm an atheist that runs an atheist site and an atheist group and an atheist podcast and an atheist video stream. I have no burden of proving gods exist. I could justify why I believe gods don't exist, but that's not what you're asking me to. But here's a few references from various atheist philosophers and this and that and all that. And he changed the second he realized that I was an atheist too. It was the change in his mind was like, okay. And to be fair to him, he then approached it the right way and went, thanks for the links, I'll check them out and get back to you. Now, sometimes you even get resistance at that point. No, you're clearly a theist troll and all of that. That was an example of something that went the right way, but it was just an example of someone that came in swinging. I know all this shit. And when he suddenly realized, oh, we're the same.
Yeah.
you
Well,
know,
they adopt that very, you're either with us or against us. If you're not using the same definition, you must be against us.
yeah. Yeah, it's standard tribalism. We all do it. We're all guilty of it. It's something we need to consciously be aware of when we're doing it and when we're getting involved in these conversations. And it was interesting that at least the tribalism worked in my favor there when I was like, "Oh, I am an atheist." Suddenly he went, oh, okay. Whereas, I mean, both of us have had it before where we announce that we're an atheist. No, you're not. You're a theist troll. You're clearly a theist troll. No true atheist would say this thing.
I have software.
Yeah. That one still makes me giggle.
Yeah, I use software to track out false atheists.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.